Okay, CPL Article 160, Test 8. 160.10. Following an arrest, the appropriate officer or agency must cause or cause to be taken fingerprints of the arrested person if the offense is a felony, a misdemeanor defined in the penal law, a misdemeanor defined outside the penal law, which would constitute a felony if such person had a previous conviction for a crime. So the best example of that I could think of is a DWI. So the answer to that was D, all the above. Felony, misdemeanor defined in the penal law, misdemeanor defined outside the penal law, which would constitute a felony if such person had a previous conviction for a crime. 2, a police officer who makes an arrest for any offense with or without a warrant may take fingerprints if the officer is unable to determine the person's identity, or reasonably suspects the ID given by the person is not accurate, or reasonably suspects that the person is being sought after by law enforcement for the commission of some other offense. Whenever fingerprints are required or permitted to be taken, the photographs and palm prints of the arrested person may also be taken. So you can just take the fingerprints, you don't have to take both, but you do have the option to take both. 4, upon taking the fingerprints, the appropriate police officer or agency must forward 2 copies of such fingerprints to DCJS. Now, the answer to this is without unnecessary delay. So just like without unnecessary delay, after the person gets arrested on a warrant of arrest, they have to be brought to court. Without unnecessary delay, the officer's got to take fingerprints. 5 is 160.30. Upon receiving fingerprints from a police officer or agency, DCJS must have to do 2 things: classify them and search their records for information concerning a previous record of defendant, including any adjudication as a juvenile delinquent or youthful offender. So the answer to this was E. Both A and C are true. 6, if the fingerprints received by DCJS are not sufficiently legible to permit accurate and complete classification, they must be returned to the forwarding police officer or agency with an explanation of the defects and request that they be retaken if possible. 7, upon receipt of a report from DCJS, the recipient police officer or agency must promptly transmit 1 copy thereof to the DA of the county and 2 copies to the court in which the action is pending. So this one is not without unnecessary delay. This one is promptly, which as far as I'm concerned is basically the same thing, but just know it's a different word, promptly here. If this is false, a DA, police officer, or employee of any law enforcement agency may request an alleged victim of a sex crime submit to a polygraph or psychological stress evaluator examination. That's false. They may not do that. 9, CPL 16050 applies to, and the answer was C, any criminal action terminated in favor of the accused unless upon 5 days notice to the defendant, the DA demonstrates upon motion that the interests of justice require otherwise. So the phrase terminated in favor of the accused has a specific meaning in the law, and it's very important that, like, as a clerk, that you understand what that is. 160.55 applies to B. The answer was convictions of any traffic infraction or violation except for the traffic infraction driving while ability impaired, 1192.1. So the main difference between 160.55 and 160.50 is that the court record is sealed in 160.50, and the other main difference is that 160.50 is a termination of the action in favor of the accused, not just to a non-criminal disposition. It's in favor of the accused. 11, CPL 160.58 applies to, and the answer was D, a conviction for an offense related to possession of drugs, 220 or 221 of the penal law, where the defendant has completed a judicial diversion program pursuant to CPL 216 or another judicially sanctioned drug treatment program of similar duration, requirements, and level of supervision. 12, 160.59 applies to, and the answer to this was none of the above. And the answer is actually what you had to write in question 13. So CPL 160.59 applies to a defendant who has been convicted of up to 2 eligible offenses, but not more than 1 felony offense, provided that 10 years have elapsed since the last conviction or release, whatever was later. 14, CPL 160.59, records sealed pursuant to this section shall be made available to, and it's any of the above. So the defendant or his designated agent, qualified agencies as defined in Executive Law 835 sub 9, federal and state law enforcement agencies when acting within the scope of their law enforcement duties. Any state or local officer or agency with responsibility for issuance of licenses to possess guns when the person has made application for such a license. And there's other things, but for this question, that was the answer E, any of the above.